Hi, Matt with eTrailer. Today we'll be assembling the eTrailer truck rack, and this is what it's going to look like once it's completed. So let's get into it. Step one is just laying everything out and assessing that you have all the correct parts. Now we're going to start with the bigger pieces, and the way I got this laid out is kind of be in the orientation how it's going to be installed. So on the back side, we're going to have crossbar C, and next to that we're going to have both the rear legs. There's going to be a left and a right one along with their feet. Right here, we're going to have a rear sidebar. There will be two of these, and we're going to have a connecting plate on either side. In front of that, we're going to have the front legs. There's going to be a left and right, and they're also going to have feet themselves. And in front of that, we're going to have crossbar B, and then we're going to have the front sidebars. There's going to be two of those. At the very front, we're going to have crossbar A and then the cab bar. For your hardware, we are going to have M16 hardware, and to tighten that into place, you will need a 24mm socket and wrench. You're going to need two of them to tighten either side. And that's going to come with two washers, a lock washer, and then a nut. We are also going to have M10 hardware, and to tighten this into place, you will need a 17mm socket and wrench. Again, you're going to need two of those. And there's going to be two of them that are just going to be straight bolts. And then we'll have two more. There will be bolts that do have nuts that come with them. Then we are going to have 8 of these carriage bolts. Those will have nuts as well. And then we're going to have 2 longer carriage bolts that are going to have a washer and a nut. And the last bit of hardware that we will be using is going to be our M12 hardware. Now you will use a 19mm socket and wrench. You'll need 2 of those that tighten this into place, and each one of those are going to come with a washer and a nut. Your kit will also have some clamps that come with it. We will not be using that for the assembly. That's going to be for the installation. And that's going to be using your M19 hardware. The difference with these though is instead of having a lock nut, this is just going to be a regular nut. To assemble the rack, we want to start on the front side, and when we do this, most of this process will be done upside down. We are going to connect our cab bar to our front sidebar. To do that, we're going to grab our M10 carriage bolt. This is going to be the longer one. This is going to go into this point where we have a square opening. Once we push that through, before we fully push it through, we're going to put a washer in between there. Now go to the other side. Now we're actually going to start connecting it for real now. Just like that. Like I said, we are going to do this upside down until we get that to poke through. From here, we're just going to grab our lock nut and secure it to the top. And then we are going to fully tighten this down with our M17 socket and wrench, and then repeat this on the other side. And this is what it should look like with both sidebars attached to the cab bar. We're going to come to the end of our front sidebars, and we're going to install crossbar A. This one will not have any brackets on it. The way you're going to do this is line this up with the thicker rails on your sidebars and slide it into position. When you do this, you may have to hit either side to kind of get this to slide on until it slowly goes into place. Crossbar A should end up in a location similar to this, anywhere past this railing right here. Now we can move on to crossbar B, and this one will have the bracket installed, and we want to make sure this bracket is closest to the back of the rack. It's going to install it in a very similar process, making sure it lines up with the railings, and this one should be a little bit easier to slide into place since we've already installed the other crossbar. We're going to install our front legs. Now the way you can tell this is the front legs is the shape of this clamp at the top. This should have an opening at the very top of it. And when you put this on, each one will have a dedicated left and right side. The way you can tell is once you put this into place, if this sits flush against your bracket and this cleat here is facing out, you're on the right track. We can install some of our hardware. That's going to be our M12 bolt. We're also going to have a washer and lock nut to that. Now before we actually put that on, we want to make sure our crossbars are in the right location. So make sure you grab a tape measure and make sure it's even on either side. Once you're there, you're going to grab that bolt and that washer, and you're going to push it through this hole, making sure that we are keeping the head of the bolt on the outside of your rack, and then grabbing that lock nut and tightening the inside. You don't have to fully tighten this up, just enough to make sure it's going to stay in place. And then repeat this on the other side, and once this side's done, then repeat this process on crossbar B. Then we're going to grab our 19mm socket and wrench and tighten this down just enough where it's not going to be too loose, but we can still make some adjustments. You will have a wrench on the other side to make sure this doesn't spin. With crossbar A tightened down, we repeated that same process on crossbar B. Now we're going to connect our crossbar B to our leg. The way we're going to do that is with our M16 hardware. That's going to be that bolt, 2 washers, a split washer, and a locking nut. The way this is going to install is we're going to line up the holes on our leg to the holes on that bracket. We want to push the bolt through, ensuring there's only one washer on it. And we'll hold that into place. And from the other side, we're going to put a regular washer, or a split washer, and then a locking nut. Then we're going to repeat that same process for the hole below. We want to make sure we tighten down our M16 bolts. That's going to be with a 24 wrench and socket. When you're doing this, you want to make sure you don't over tighten this, because we still want to be able to adjust this at the end of the day, but we don't want it too loose because it's going to be moving around a lot. Notice when I go to move this, I do have to put a little bit of force behind it. That's what we're looking for. Then we're going to make sure we tighten this other bolt and then repeat this on the other side. The front of the rack is now assembled. Now we're going to repeat that on the back side. To do this, we are going to grab our legs. Remember, these will have the corresponding sides. We will make sure that our cleat is facing out and this front bracket is facing forward. The way you're going to install this is by lowering this in place, making sure those clamps wrap around the thicker side of your rails, and we're going to push this into place. We can lower our leg until it sits just like this, and you can either place this on top of the rear sidebar, or you can place it underneath that bracket so everything lines up. We're going to grab our M10 hardware and push that through that opening, making sure that the nut is on the inside, and we are just going to loosely install this. Once both rear legs are installed, then we're going to install crossbar C to our rear sidebar. The way we're going to do that is by lifting up on the sidebar so it sits just like this. And once you install your rear or C crossbar, you want to make sure that the smaller hole on it is facing towards the back. We're then just going to line up the larger hole until it sits right on top of this bar. And then we're going to grab our M10 hardware, the one without the nut, and screw that on into that open hole. Then we'll come back through and tighten this all the way down with a M17 socket and wrench till you can't do it anymore. Once that's tight, we're going to grab our M16 hardware. This is going to install just like the ones on our front side through one opening, making sure we put our additional washer and split washer on the other side, ending it off with a nut. Once you have these both loosely in place, just ensure you tighten these up and then repeat this on the other side. From there, you're going to make sure you install some M12 bolts like we did earlier on our front legs, just like this, on both ends. Then, just ensure you don't over tighten it. We still want enough movement where we can adjust it just a little bit. With both ends assembled, now we can connect them. we're just going to grab this from either spot. One's going to have a male end, one's going to have a female end, and these are just going to slide in together. You can start the process for one side, then move over to the next side. And just slide this on a little bit. Don't push it in all the way. Just make sure you get the second side started, and then you can push this in all the way. You just push that together. If you're having issues, you might have to rotate the sidebars so they line up better. From there, we want to grab our connecting plate. This is going to line up with the holes on these two bars. Line those up, and then grab your smaller M10 carriage bolts and just put those through the holes with the head facing on the outside of your rack and the nut on the inside. With all four of these installed, then we are going to tighten this down the rest of the way. I like to lift up on mine to try to eliminate as much of a gap here as possible and apply a head to the top of these carriage bolts. We can move over to installing the feet. When you do this, you want to make sure that if you're on the front side, they are facing inward. If they're on the back side, they're going to be facing the opposite way. You also want to make sure that this L shape is going to be facing in this orientation on each side. Then you're going to push this into place. You might have to wiggle it some. And then line up these holes. With those lined up, we're then going to grab our M16 hardware and put that through these holes. You want to ensure that the bolt is going to be facing this way. And once you have this in place, you're going to have one washer on one side, and we're going to have a washer and a split washer on the other side. We're going to top that off with a lock nut. You can use a M24 socket and wrench to tighten this into place. And then we're going to do the same thing on this bottom hole. Put that washer and that split washer on and top it off with a lock nut. Just make sure when you do tighten your foot, you don't over tighten it, you tighten both of those bolts. You can check just by coming over here and seeing if it will pivot. Should take a fair amount of force to do that. Right now we're looking good. Once that's done, you repeat that same process on the rest of the feet and then flip this over. And the last thing is just make sure you leave these uprights a little bit loosened so you can adjust them when you do the installation. But that's just a look at the assembly for our etrailer truck rack. I'm Matt. Thanks for watching.